Get ready for certified USDA prime gun stuff on the GunGuyTV podcast.
Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for listening to GunGuyTV's podcast and for supporting me as you do on YouTube and other places. I really do appreciate it. One thing I do want to mention to you before I get started here is one of probably my longest supporters, which is Optics Planet. And by the way, Optics Planet is not paying me to tell you what I'm telling you right now. I want you to know that Optics Planet started sending me gear to review when I had about 1,500 subscribers. I was stunned when they wanted to start sending me things. And I said, why? My channel is so small. I'm not doing you any good. And the response was, yeah, but you know what? You do a great job and your channel will be big at some point. We want to start supporting you now. So I am very grateful to and loyal to Optics Planet because they started with me when I was brand new. And now that we have over 100,000 subscribers, that doesn't mean we're huge. We're not. But at the same time, GunGuyTV has grown a lot, and I certainly don't want to forget the companies that started with me, one of which is Optics Planet. So I urge you, if you're shopping for gun gear or whatever, check out Optics Planet first. You can find a link to Optics Planet in the description of this podcast. You'll also find it on our website. There's a little banner there and so on. That'll take you to Optics Planet. Make sure you use the code GUNGUY5 during your purchases. If you do, that'll save you 5% on all of your purchases at opticsplanet.com. Now, there are two things I want to talk about in this podcast. In the first half an hour of the podcast, which, as you know by now, is syndicated all over the place, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and so on, we're going to talk about the foolishness of the all or nothing at all mentality that gun rights organizations seem to have in some respects, and that gun owners and Second Amendment supporters seem to have, and why that may well be self-defeating. And then after that, we'll talk about the issues going on with Google and YouTube and what's changing there, if anything. I'll give you some, inside baseball as to how Google relates to GunGuyTV and what's happening with Google and what's happening with YouTube as they fall under increasing scrutiny by the United States government and certainly by people who simply do not trust Google or any of its properties anymore. There's an actual headline today in Breitbart News: Google slammed for political bias at the annual shareholders meeting. And what you got to understand is Google right now is facing antitrust probes in both the FTC and the House Judiciary Committee, and so they're receiving a lot of pressure. And they're actually, it seems to me, starting to change a little bit. So I'll talk about that in the second half of the podcast, which, of course, is only on Patreon. So if you want to hear that second half, you've got to be on Patreon. All right, now, as far as the all or nothing at all mentality, I'm seeing this happening a lot. And I have to say I thoroughly and completely understand the emotion of it. But from a strategy standpoint, it doesn't make any sense. For example, I'm going to use Donald Trump as an example. President Trump is not, and I'm going to say this loud and clear, President Trump is not an ardent defender of the Second Amendment in all of its areas and forms. He just isn't. He is not a hunter. He's not an outdoorsman. He's not a person who is interested in the tactical stuff that you or I or someone else might be interested in. He is not a person who thoroughly and completely is going to defend every aspect of Second Amendment rights. He just isn't. For that matter, Donald Trump is not a lot of things people think Donald Trump is. I have known since day one that Donald Trump is a bit of a pragmatist. He's a businessman. And a very, very good one, and a very successful businessman. He's done extremely well in his life, and he's worked very hard to get there. I certainly applaud his success, and I honor the fact that he did it. He really did. He's one sharp cookie. He's smart, he's capable, and he's done a marvelous job in his own life of building his own company and his own financial empire, if you will. And now, frankly, in a lot of ways, he's repeating that as president of the United States with his new brand. So I want you to think about it that way. President Trump's brand when he was Donald J. Trump, private citizen, was the Trump Organization brand. And you notice that that was on everything. It was everywhere. He embraced it 100%. And his entire life has been spent building the Trump Organization brand. And guess what? Then he became president. And he turned that over to his kids. And he took on a new brand, the United States of America. And his goal has been, since day one, to expand that brand, to grow that brand, to increase the returns for that brand, to strengthen that brand for the stockholders. And you and I are the stockholders. We are the citizens. We're the people for whom he sees he works. That's how a businessman thinks. They have stockholders. They have people they answer to, that they need to increase the business for. They need to grow it for. They need to grow the returns and so on. So he is 100% for the U.S. brand. And that's what you see in him as he travels around the world, and he stands up to everyone. And he doesn't care who he makes mad or who he irritates if he has to irritate them. He doesn't care who he has tariffs against or whatever. He's a pragmatist. He's going to use whatever tools are available to him to accomplish the goal of growing the United States brand. Now, as a United States citizen in his 60s and a man who loves this country, I can tell you I'm very grateful for that kind of mindset. I am not a globalist. I never have been a globalist. I never will be a globalist. I'm a capitalist, and I'm an American. That's who I am. As far as I'm concerned, capitalism works. It has been the best system on our planet. It's not perfect, but it has certainly lifted the majority of people out of poverty over any other political or economic system. And the United States is by far, without question, the best country in the world. Is it perfect? No, but it's still the best country in the world. And I've been to some other ones, and I can tell you that some of them are nice, but they're not as great as this country. I love this country, and it's obvious to me that Donald Trump was the right choice to take this country's brand and everything associated with it and get it out of the doldrums and out of the failure slide that Obama had put it in. Obama still hates this country, and he goes around in other countries and talks about how terrible we are. Trump doesn't do that. He is turning all of that around. He wants to make America great again. He wants to make America strong again. He is all about the American brand. That's who Donald Trump is. That's what he's doing. Now, along the way, he also wants to defend the constitutional rights of Americans as he understands them and supports them. That said, he is not primarily a Second Amendment president. He just isn't. And anybody who has watched him to any degree in his life or knows anything about the guy recognizes that. Now, his sons hunt and so on, but he's not that guy. He carries a gun. I don't know if he does now, but he did. He had a permit from New York, which just tells you how much money he's got. But he wasn't a guy that's going to go out and use suppressors or go out and shoot NFA guns or go to the range on a regular basis or enjoy the shooting sports or go shoot IPSC or three-gun or whatever. He's not that guy. That's not who he is. If we recognize that, then we get to recognize that he's going to be pragmatic in his support for the Second Amendment. That means he's going to support those things which he knows he can accomplish with it, and he's going to be willing to give up some things along the way if he has to do that for strategic or tactical purposes. Hence the bump stock ban. Hence the, I believe, coming suppressor restrictions or ban. Because a guy like Trump doesn't see the bump stock as being particularly important because he's not an ideologue. He doesn't care about idealism. He cares about the United States brand. He wants to secure the rights of the people as the majority of the people use them, not the fringe. And I don't mean to say fringe in a negative connotation, but the fact is the number of people who own or would own or want or use bump stocks is extraordinarily small. Likewise, the number of people who own or would like to have or use suppressors by comparison of the majority of gun owners is relatively small. Now, I would like to have them because it is precisely because of the loud noise of firearms and other environmental noises like that that I have to wear hearing aids. And if I'd had suppressors all my life and been able to hunt with them and shoot with them, I probably wouldn't need hearing aids today. So I'm very much a believer that suppressors are an opportunity to save the hearing of the United States populace so that when they're in their 60s, as I am, they're not struggling to hear their kids or their spouse or their friends or the television set or whatever. But that's not who Donald Trump is. As a result, I think we have to look at what he does, what he's accomplished, and not expect that we're going to get everything we want out of this president. I'm going to explain more about that in just a minute. One way you can support GunGuyTV beyond Patreon, if you happen to be on Patreon, is to use our Amazon link. If you shop Amazon using our Amazon link, then whenever you shop, we get a little bit of a stipend, if you will, from Amazon. It's a little marketing fee. It doesn't cost you anything. Everything you do on Amazon, your Amazon Prime or your free shipping or whatever, works the same way. All that happens is that they pay us a little fee. Now, this is another instance of all or nothing at all. Amazon is not a gun-friendly company. But you can certainly use Amazon to support Second Amendment advocates like me and GunGuyTV. Well, if they're not a gun-friendly company, at least take the chance to pick their pocket and take some of their money and put it toward something that they don't support, which would be firearms rights. So that's an opportunity for you to help us. You can find our link by going to the website at GunGuy.tv and then clicking on the Amazon banner at the top, and then every time you shop Amazon, we will get a little bit of money out of it. How cool is that?
Saving the Second Amendment, one episode at a time. This is the GunGuyTV podcast.
So what I'm suggesting here as we continue in this discussion of all or nothing at all is that we recognize that we're not going to get everything we want and that we get what we can. With Donald Trump, it's obvious that we're getting a lot. We've accomplished a lot having Donald Trump as president. For crying out loud, he's, at this point, I believe he has now appointed up 110 conservative justices to the federal bench. That includes 2 Supreme Court picks, and if Donald Trump is reelected, which I hope and pray he is in 2020, there's a very good chance that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is going to be gone, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or Ruth Buzzy Ginsburg, or whatever you want to call her, that she's going to go away. She's either going to pass away or she's going to retire because she's in her mid-80s. And at some point, you just can't do it anymore. She sleeps through half the stuff anyway. So if that's the case, there's an opportunity for him to have 3 Supreme Court justices. But in addition to that, he has essentially taken the Ninth Circus Court of Appeals out here in the West, which has been a kangaroo court, which has rubber-stamped every leftist and liberal court case under the sun, and certainly every anti-gun court case under the sun. He's taken that court and he's turned it into pretty much a 50-50 court. He's appointed so many justices to fill the vacancies on that court that we now have a situation where it's no longer a rubber stamp for leftist ideas. It's no longer an automatic win for anti-gunners. Now, it's not an automatic win for the Second Amendment either. But now we've got, I think he's 2 justices away in appointments from essentially turning that court into a 50-50 split. That is enormous. That's an incredible change. It's no longer the nutty ninth, perhaps. It's no longer the kangaroo court that it used to be. And if you had told me that that was going to happen in my lifetime, I wouldn't have believed it. There are so many positive cases being resolved on our side now in the Second Amendment, in the federal court system, that it's stunning. And that right there, that is due almost entirely to President Donald J. Trump and his leadership. If he does nothing else but get these justices where they are, that's an amazing accomplishment for the Second Amendment and for the life of the country to begin with. But he's also done some other things. When I look at him, I say, well, this is the most Second Amendment friendly president in terms of what he has accomplished for the Second Amendment in my lifetime. And I'm in my 60s, and I'm a big fan of Ronald Reagan. But there's some things Ronald Reagan did I don't agree with at all. In fact, some things he did here in California I don't agree with at all, and relating to the Second Amendment in particular. But as I look at Donald Trump, I'm going, okay, well, whether he intended to help the Second Amendment or not in specific, he has helped us in the Constitution tremendously in his work in the court system, and that needs to continue. Has he done some things that I don't agree with? Of course. Has he banned bump stocks? Yes. Is that going to stand up in court? I don't know. I doubt it, but it may. Is he considering banning suppressors? Yes. I don't know if that'll stand up either, but he might do it anyway. But I don't care who you vote for, you're not going to find someone you agree with 100% of the time. And there is no way that we're going to elect a president of the United States who is going to give us everything we want. I've heard people complain, well, how come he hasn't passed right to carry reciprocity? Well, that's got nothing to do with the president of the United States and everything to do with the United States Congress. He didn't sign it because it never was put on his desk by the Congress. There's a whole lot of things like that never got to him, so there's only so much he can do. This is an exercise in going back to your high school civics class and remembering how government works. And if you've never had a civics class, then, maybe you got to go back and study civics and find out how the United States government works. How does a bill? Go back and look at Schoolhouse Rock on their little thing on I Am a Bill and find out how a bill becomes a law. And then you find out that, the president is not a king. He can only do so much. I hear people get mad at President Trump because he has not swooped into California and forced California to obey the Second Amendment. Well, that's because he doesn't have the authority or the power to do that. That's why he hasn't done it, because he can't do it. That's not how our government works. It's not how our country functions. President Trump is the president of the United States. He is not a king. He is not a czar. He is not an emperor. He's the president of the United States. He's the chief executive of the federal government, not the state government, the federal government. And within the federal government, we have 50 states. Each one has a chief executive called a governor, and each one has a legislature. In the case of California, it's comprised of the Assembly and the Senate, just as the federal government has the House and the Senate and the chief executive, who is the president. They're very similar systems. There are state laws, there are federal laws, there are state constitutions, there are federal constitutions. It's a hodgepodge mix of things that has honestly worked extremely well, and it was designed by our founders for that reason. It has lots of checks and balances in it, which limits the power of each of these different branches of government and each of these different sections of government, both state and federal. And as a result, the President of the United States has limited power. He can only do so many things. My point to you is that what he can do for the Second Amendment, not only has he done, but he is doing. And if we throw him out because we don't like the fact that he banned bump stocks, or if we stop supporting him because he may ban suppressors, I'm going to tell you right now that we are being not only incredibly foolish, but downright stupid. Because you know who will get? Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Well, she doesn't have a chance, but we're going to get some wacky, crazy, or crazy Bernie. What's going to happen to our Second Amendment right then? And yet, I read these articles like I read in Breitbart this morning, which boggle my mind. The 7 reasons the suppressor ban may cause pro-gun voters to abandon Trump. I may offend you here, but I'm going to say if you are a person who is upset with Trump over the ban on bump stocks or the proposed perhaps ban on suppressors, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I get it. I think bump stocks are useless. Personally, I have no desire to have one and can't find a practical use for one, but I also support the fact that people like them and would like to use them, and they're probably a boatload of fun, and that would be fun to take to the range. I think the NFA ought to be gone entirely, and you ought to be able to buy a fully automatic rifle or whatever, or machine gun if you want one, just like you could before the NFA. But in spite of that, I will tell you that I am not going to walk away from the single best thing that has happened in the White House for the Second Amendment in my lifetime because I didn't get everything I want. And neither should you. If you do, you're being very foolish and you are essentially throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I want to encourage you, don't do that. Now, I want to thank you again for all of your support of this podcast. I'm grateful that you listen. I'm grateful that you put up with my ranting from time to time like today. I want you to know that the podcast is broken into 2 half-an-hour segments. This first half hour is syndicated on a whole bunch of different places, so you can listen to it on your favorite podcast player, wherever that may be. You can actually listen to it on internet radio, too. If you just go to GunGuy.tv and you click on the internet radio tab, you can hear the most recent 3 episodes. They continue playing 24/7, 365, and you'll also hear them on different internet radio players all over the world, so you can listen to it there. There's lots of different places you can listen to it. But the one thing you cannot do in syndication is listen to the last 30 minutes. You get the first 30, but it's an hour-long podcast, and the second 30 is on Patreon only. And the reason I do that is because I want to do something special for the folks who support me on Patreon. As you may or may not know, it's getting more and more difficult for gun-related YouTube channels to make any money. And certainly gun-related podcasts, it's hard for them to be self-supporting. Right now, GunGuyTV is not 100% self-supporting. I shell out my money to keep it going. I need all the support I can get. So if you'd like to hear that second half an hour of the podcast, I urge you to check us out on Patreon and sign up. It'll help us, and it provides the second part of this podcast for you.
This podcast needs your help. Send your entire wallet to The Gun Guy, 1313 Mockingbird Lane, Transylvania.
Everything I just said about Donald Trump and the need of Second Amendment supporters and gun owners to support him in this coming election, to show up and cast their vote for Donald Trump, applies also and equally to the National Rifle Association. There are so many people mad at the National Rifle Association, it boggles the mind. I'm one of them. I've said it in this podcast. I've said it in my audio podcast. I am not a fan and never have been a fan of Wayne LaPierre. I think Wayne LaPierre is not... Now, he may be... I don't know him. Okay, so let me just back up and say I don't know the man. I've never met him. I don't know him personally, and I've never worked for him or with him. So he may be an absolutely fabulous chief executive. I don't know. And so I don't want to cast aspersions on his talents as a person who runs a business. However, he is completely talentless when it comes to public speaking or appearing on television or any of those things. He's flat as a pancake. He's bland as bland could be. And he's like watching the grass grow or the paint dry. He's incredibly dull, and he can't seem to string together a sentence without stumbling all over it. Neither can he seem to string together a cohesive argument on the fly. Instead, all he does is repeat talking point after talking point after talking point, which is not a good strategy and does not represent the Second Amendment well. Now, I don't think he needs, $250,000 for suits. There's a place called the Men's Warehouse, dude. Go get yourself some suits. Besides which, if you're making over $1 million a year, you can afford to buy your own stinking suits. Why is the NRA funneling money through ACMAC to buy him suits? That's ridiculous. Or a condo for some chick or any of these other things. So I'm of the opinion Wayne LaPierre needs to go sooner rather than later. I'm also of the opinion, I've expressed before, that the NRA board of 76 needs to be cut down dramatically to no more than maybe at tops 15. The rest of them all need to go. And that the board needs to function in such a way that its job is to oversee the executives and the running of the company. Likewise, the board needs to have term limits so that you can only serve on the board for a limited period of time, and then you cannot serve there again. Additionally, the board needs to have restrictions against any and all conflicts of interest, so that you don't end up with a guy like Ollie North being president of the association while he's making millions of dollars working for the chosen advertising firm of the association. That is a clear conflict of interest, and if he was in a corporation that I managed, I would have fired him. Those things need to be changed in the NRA. But what does not need to happen is the destruction of the National Rifle Association. Like it or not, agree with it or not, the National Rifle Association is the most powerful Second Amendment advocacy group on the planet. It has more power and more ability to fight for Second Amendment causes than any organization in the country. If we kill it, or if we start trying to destroy it by just abandoning it and taking our membership away, if we do those kinds of things, we are harming ourselves more than we are harming NRA. We can't have everything we want, and we can't have all or nothing. The NRA is not going to change overnight. It's going to take time and effort on the part of the members. It's going to take getting involved and figuring out who these board members are and getting rid of some of them. It's going to take making a loud noise, a publicly loud noise if necessary, and forcing the NRA to be open, transparent, and ready to listen to its members. The NRA is a very large ship with a very small rudder, and changing its course is not going to happen in a blink. It's not a sports car you can turn around and just by turning the wheel. It's going to take time and effort, and it's going to be painful, and it's going to be ugly. It needs to be done, but destroying the organization is not the answer. The other day I had a guy post, because I still post a link for people to join NRA. I want people to join NRA. Guess what? I also want them to join Gun Owners of America. I also want them to join local organizations. I'm a life member of the Gun Owners of, I'm a member of Gun Owners of California. They don't offer a life membership, or I would be. And I'm a life member of the California Rifle and Pistol Association. I'm also a life member of NRA, and I'm saving up money so I can be a life member of GOA. And I'm a life member currently of the Second Amendment Foundation. I support these various organizations. I don't necessarily agree with all that they do all the time, but they do an awful lot of good. NRA is the same way. So I think as gun owners, we have to get out of this all or nothing mindset. That's the first thing. I think in addition to that, we've got to stop listening to paid internet trolls. Do you not think that our enemies pay trolls to go on social media and pretend to be Second Amendment supporters and then urge the rest of us to abandon NRA? Or to abandon this gun group or that? Do you think that they don't pay them to stir up dissension? They absolutely do. Now, not everybody who posts a comment like that is a troll, but I got to tell you, a lot of them are. A lot of them are. You and I cannot be swayed. We can be swayed, but we cannot afford to be swayed by that kind of tactic. We've got to be people who are strong enough to have our own mind. I have people regularly tell me I need to drop NRA. You know what? I'm not a guy who's ever succumbed much to peer pressure, and I'm not going to start now. I had a guy yesterday say, for the sake of the gun rights and for the sake of my subscription to your channel, take down that link to the NRA. What is that? That's a threat. I'm going to unsubscribe from your channel unless you take down that link. Well, first of all, I'm not a person who bows to peer pressure. Secondly, I don't respond well to being threatened. That doesn't go well with me, as you can tell by the tone of my voice. And third, I don't make my living on YouTube, so if you want to unsubscribe, it doesn't take $1 out of my pocket. I'm trying to do this because I love the country and love the Second Amendment. I own a business. We're doing just fine. We're not in financial straits. If YouTube shut me down tomorrow and said you can't make money on YouTube, I'd keep doing what I'm doing because I'm funding the channel. YouTube isn't. But that's what happens. People act in that way, and they say those kinds of things. And a lot of those, some of them are really Second Amendment supporters who are upset. But I got to be honest with you, a lot of them are not. A lot of them are just trolls, and a lot of them are trying to change the opinion of NRA and crush NRA right before a presidential election when they want to and have tried to pull out every stop to accomplish the removal of a man they hate, and that is Donald J. Trump. We can't afford to go down that path. So I want to urge you, stay strong, support the National Rifle Association, at least by maintaining your membership. You don't want to give them a dime, that's fine. Give it to, if you're in California, give it to the California Rifle and Pistol Association. That money does not go to NRA. It gets used in California by CRPA. If you don't like CRPA because they are an NRA affiliate, fine. Give it to Gun Owners of California. Sam and Lori Paredes at Gun Owners of California are awesome. In every state, there is a state association that is actually working hard. It doesn't matter whether it's California or Oregon or Washington or whatever. Now, I don't know who they are in all of those states because I'm in California. I know who some of them are, but I don't know. And there are battles in these states that are huge that these local organizations and state organizations are working to accomplish victory for us in. Washington is a key one right now. There's a big initiative up there that needs to be fought. I think the Yankee Marshal on YouTube apparently put out a challenge to YouTubers the other day to support it. I haven't seen it. To be honest with you, I don't have a lot of time to watch television or YouTube, so I haven't seen his video, but that's what I've been told by GunGuyTV viewers. Well, he's right. If that's the case, we need to support them up there too, and if you don't want to do it on a national basis, do it on a state basis or local basis, but get in there and support your local Second Amendment association and recognize that we're not going to get everything we want, we're not going to win every time, and not everybody we support is going to agree with us on everything. That's the way the world works. And we got to stop being childish and wanting to abandon somebody the first time they disagree with us. It's the most idiotic thing in the world. It's extremely foolish, and it is going to cost us our constitutional rights if we don't stop. There you go. Now you've heard my rant. Thank you very much for listening. If you happen to be on Patreon, stick with me. We're going to wrap up this part of the podcast here. You may never want to listen to me again after this podcast. I get it, but I hope you do. If you're on Patreon, stick around. We'll get into the next subject here in a minute, which is the kind of behind-the-scenes, inside baseball view of what's happening with YouTube and Google and like that, as far as I can tell, being a YouTuber. And if you're not, and you're listening to the syndicated version, I'm going to wrap it up here, and thank you very much for everything you do. Thank you so very much for listening. Thank you so very much for your support. Please don't stop. Have a wonderful week, and wherever you go, whatever you do, please be safe.
You've been listening to the GunGuy TV podcast.